You know, I didn't want to be around there and drink and be with these men. Those were my idols. I wanted to be just like them.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but when the pain got real bad, my solutions to my pain were very radical: suicide attempts and, you know, wanting to die and not be on. I didn't want to be on this planet anymore. And I fought this. I'm 55 years old today, and I fought this all the way up to, you know, 7 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that little boy that's experiencing this complex trauma then goes to the country club, has two things happen. You have, well, three things. You have older men that are probably giving you a sense of masculinity where you're probably
They were my
curious.
father figures.
So your father, like,
Yeah.
and the question of like, am I okay? Am I behaving myself? And they're probably giving you affirmation.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you're drinking. And I know I was telling my wife the other day.
And doing drugs. I was into drugs and alcohol. I was doing whatever you had.
Yeah, just to feel okay.
That's right.
And to feel like what you felt like everyone else felt.
That's right.
Like.
That's right.
And that makes a lot of sense. I was telling her, I like myself when I'm more tipsy.
Yeah.
And that's just an honest thought because I feel like I'm more free. I feel like there's less of that, the inhibitions kind of go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I can be a little bit more relaxed.
Well, and it's really cool you said that because I talk about that a lot. And when I always remember the but I never ever remembered the
yes,
or I never ever remembered, you know, put your hands behind your back.
Yeah.
And what happens is that for the very first time I did that and I found that sense of ease and comfort and I had that feeling, okay, this is how everybody feels without drinking.
Or your perception.
My perception.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's euphoria. And so in addiction, substance abuse addiction, because we'll get into later, we're all addicts.
Totally.
You know.
Yeah.
But in substance abuse was in order to stay there, what do? I got to do more.
Yes.
And so I was
different.
Right. And it got so bad that, you know, I was drinking because I wanted to feel like everybody around me looked. Yeah. And then it's progressive. And then I kept drinking and doing drugs because I wanted to feel good about the bad decisions I was making. So I was trying to medicate my real trauma that I had. And as a result of my actions and the role I played in it, doing drugs and alcohol, now I'm increasing self-inflicted trauma. So now I have two monsters, you know, fighting one another. Yeah. And then every once in a while, someone's saying, you got to find Jesus. I'm like, Casper the Friendly Ghost ain't going to help my problems.
Totally.
You know, and, you know, at the time the church was right and I was wrong. And, you know, and so, but when I got out of high school, I immediately went to the PGA Tour, the Pro Golf Tour.
Really?
Yeah. I was a caddy on the tour because, I mean, I had a great attitude, a great personality. I was very good at golf. My golf IQ was extremely high. And I went on the tour and caddy for the best player in the world, you know, at the time. His name was Lanny Watkins. And he's a Hall of Famer. He's won 22 events. I mean, basically, I went on the tour with Lanny Watkins, Tiger Woods at the time.
Wow.
And flying private jets around the country.
How old?
This is right out of high school. I was not even 21. I mean, I was about 20 years old.
Yeah.
I was a bookie on the tour because I was a gambler. And I was using my analytical math side of my brain. And when I went out there, man, I'd found life. This is great. And I was away from my mom and dad. So I felt accepted. I felt a part of.
And at this point, they don't know about the history with Grandpa.
No. They know nothing about it.
And Grandpa's still around?
No, he passed away when I was in the 6th grade.
Okay, so what was that like?
He died of alcoholism, throat cancer. And I'll never forget the day that he had major surgeries and he was bald and they literally had to take a piece of his bone off of his skull to put off his hip to put in his head, and he looked like a monster. And I'll never forget that I was in the hallway at the hospital and my mom said, you're going to come in here and pay your final respects to your grandfather.
Wow.
And I'll never forget how nauseated I was when I went in there and I saw him, and he not only always looked like a monster to me, he really looked like a monster to me. And I'll never forget that his head was like this and just went and just looked at me with these glass eyes. And he put his hand out to grab my hand, and I grabbed his hand and I fainted.
Oh my goodness.
I just totally fainted, and the nurses, came and got me.
Oh wow.
And I got in trouble. Like, you were so selfish. How could you do that? 'Cause I was so nauseated.
Wow. Dude.
And it really affected me. And then he passed.
And you're 12 at that point.
Yeah. I mean, and so he passed, and one of the things I was so thankful for is I begged not to go to the funeral, and we got to stay home. My brother and I got to stay home, and we didn't have to go to the funeral. And I thought that would give me some relief when he passed, and it didn't. I was just haunted by him to where, even to this day, I still catch myself literally just being here in your studio when I asked to go to the restroom, I lock the door behind me. You know what I mean? And it's just this habit that I do, part of, the sexual abuse and, on clothing in front of, anybody.
Yeah.
And so that happened. And then I buried it so deep, the resentments and anger that I had towards him. And on top of that, I was, being physically abused at home, by my father and my mother. And my mother is identical to me and identical to him. And she struggles with alcohol and pills. And, and so I triggered her, my
when you
actions.
say identical, what do you mean?
We had the same mannerisms,
Got it.
Cut out of the same cloth.
Yeah.
And so, which has helped me today, because now I look at, man, what a life she had to grow up in, and living that life with her father. No telling what he did to her. I don't know, but no telling what he did to her. So, as time goes forward, go through the tour. I was out there for 5 years, but the men that I grew up in the country club were in real estate and construction, very powerful real estate moguls.
Yeah.
And those connections, helped me that when I got off the tour in 1995, I went straight into real estate and into home building and got married my childhood, best friend since kindergarten.
Wow.
And, we were married for 14 years and had 2 beautiful boys. And, I knew going into that relationship, her parents that I knew very well, obviously, were very toxic and, tough, but I could change them. I could fix them,
Yeah.
And then 14 years later, after, being in real estate, I became one of the most well-known high-end luxury home builders in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and then and across the country.
Wow.
And, building homes. And we had an empire going. And in 2009, my wife collapsed with a massive brain hemorrhage. Wow. And was in a coma for 3 years.
Oh, my gosh.
And then my in-laws came in and really totally just destroyed everything over money, and family was fighting and all this stuff. And I lost my mind. And I haven't spoken to my boys since, and to this day. And so there was a lot of more trauma happening.
Wow. Okay. So just to rewind for a second. So your wife has a brain aneurysm. She's in the hospital in a coma for 3 years.
Yeah.
How old are your boys at this point?
At the time, they were very young. I was coaching them, and they were my life. You know, they were my life. And let me back up a little bit. When I was on tour, I'd met a person on tour, got her pregnant, and we had a son. And we got married. I was married to her for maybe 11 months, and I treated them wrong. I did them wrong and literally abandoned them. And I said, I never want to do that again. So these boys became my life. Yeah. They became my drug. In 2002, I went to Betty Ford, and to try to get sober. And when I came back, I was dry for about 6 years, but my drug of choice was my boys and work and money. I was seeking all these visible things, to do that, but I was still really empty inside. The isms were still there, alcoholism, I, self, and me. And then, when that situation happened, it was horrible, it was, and I literally lost my mind. And then in 2000,
what does that look like? So your in-laws come in, your wife is in a coma. And how old are your boys again?
They were, let's say they were 9 and 10.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they were 9 and 10.
Still like formative years, but still young where they need dad.
Yeah. And I was coaching all their, sporting events, and I was the coach, and my boys, they're freaks. I mean, everything they did in sports they were the best. Yeah. So that was a drug. Yeah. This is great. Totally. They were like remote control cars.
Vicariously living through their success.
Exactly.
Giving them the things that you didn't have, the safe upbringing, and now you have.
And I was doing it. I was giving it to them.
Totally.
And I was Disney dad.
Yeah.
And so we were very close, and my in-laws literally took that away from me, and to the brainwashing of the boys. And Ryan, one of my biggest things is I get accused of doing something that I didn't do. It just buries me.
Yeah.
It buries me. And they were
because of that childhood trauma.
That's right.
Being in control or out of control and then being in trouble.
That's right.
Whew.
That's right. And my younger brother, we don't speak to this day, but he said something really powerful one time in defending me. He says, Michael, watching all this going on and the trauma he went through watching all this, he's pulled a gun out of my mouth 2 or 3 times. But he says, Michael, the punishment never fit the crime, with mom and dad, what you did. And that really gave me some relief.
Totally.
But
someone who saw you, someone who saw the pain.
And he shared with me, he was very scared. He was just waiting for the day that I was going to die, and not kill myself. And so, fast forwarding, to when all this went down and all the stuff that they were, saying to him. And I mean, I was served papers. She's in a coma and I'm being served papers, of a restraining order that I can't see my kids. And I'm like, how's this happening? And so
what were they alleging?
What was that?
What were they alleging?
Nothing. They just wanted a restraining order that I couldn't be with my kids.
So they didn't say he's hitting them. It was just, here's a restraining order.
Yeah. And they started saying that I was drinking, I was doing drugs, I was never at the hospital, to the point where the doctor actually called me and he says, hey, we need to talk to you. Your mother-in-law's up here, saying things to your wife, and we hear her saying things. This is not true, saying that you're not present. I was there all the time, and then working. I had a business to run.
Yeah.
And so I handed the company over to my brother. He finished all the jobs out. And here's what happened is that all the things that were being said about me, here's where my mistake was. And I didn't have the tools. The tools were presented to me. I just chose not to use them. My behaviors started making what they were saying about me maybe believable.
Interesting.
Maybe believable.